Whenever a truly great game gets a sequel that lives up to its predecessor, it should, in theory, be a cause for grand celebration. Considering how many bad sequels there are in gaming, and the world of entertainment in general, you would think that any time a developer manages to capitalise on the hype and defy the odds, their next instalment would immediately be loved by gamers everywhere. Yet, gaming history is filled with cases of great sequels that just went by without anyone ever taking notice. And that's a shame. Not only should good sequels be celebrated whenever they appear, but these games happen to be particularly great experiences that not nearly enough people took the time to play. I'm Peter from WhatCulture.com, and here are 7 great video game sequels that nobody played. Number 7. Killer Instinct 2. Killer Instinct never quite achieved the same notoriety as franchises like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, but it was a frantic and creative game that charmed nearly everyone who played it. Sadly, many of the people that loved Killer Instinct never got the chance to play the second installment. Whereas the first entry gained a large chunk of its following thanks to the SNES port, Killer Instinct 2 was an arcade-only game that wouldn't see a home release until it was repackaged as Killer Instinct Gold and ported to the N64. Unfortunately, that port failed to provide significant technological upgrades to make up for the time difference between the two releases, and didn't then sell enough copies to establish anything of a legacy. The arcade version of Killer Instinct 2 did a fantastic job of advancing the series and showcasing that it could hang with the biggest names in the genre, but sadly its fumbled management would contribute to the series getting benched for far too long. Number 6. Viewtiful Joe 2. One of the most stylish games of the time, Viewtiful Joe was as much a celebration of comic book superheroes as it was a celebration of gaming. It was an energetic title that just made you feel alive while playing it, and that's why it's such a shame that the sequel's release felt dead on arrival. Viewtiful Joe 2 is a perfect example of how to do video game sequels properly. It doesn't reinvent the concept by any means, but it improves upon everything that made Viewtiful Joe 1 so great. Yet even though it was objectively better than the first game, the second entry failed to achieve the same critical or financial acclaim. Everyone appeared to agree that it was an exceptional title, but at release it just came and went without anyone really stopping to notice. Maybe the novelty of the original had just worn off by that point, but this is a sequel that is well worth going back to experience if you never did before. Number 5. BioShock 2. Here's a contentious one. I loved BioShock 2, but apparently most people in the What Culture offices think that it's kind of obvious to see why it was overlooked. It was clear from the beginning, apparently, that this wouldn't be the quote-unquote proper follow-up to BioShock, and elements like an unnecessary multiplayer mode had fans worried it might be a simple cash-in attempt. But I think the truth is more complicated. While BioShock 2 isn't on the same level as the original, it is a surprisingly creative prequel that placed you in the role of Rapture's most memorable enemy, the Big Daddy. That's got to be worth something, right? The new perspective not only helped to expand the already compelling universe of BioShock, but proved to be interesting in its own right. Honestly, even the supposedly unnecessary multiplayer is kind of fun. BioShock 2 may have come across as a bit forced and maybe even a cash-in, but really, the game that we got deserves far more attention than it really received. Number 4. Resident Evil Code Veronica. When talking about the greats of the Resi series, the conversation almost always seems to revolve around the perfect sequel that was Resi 2, or the revolutionary Resident Evil 4. Whatever love is left tends to go to the GameCube remake of Resident Evil or Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, and what's lost in the discussion is most certainly Resident Evil Code Veronica. The game didn't really have a gimmick like the iconic Nemesis enemy or the overhaul of Resi 4, but it is the game that absolutely perfected the original formula. The story's epic, the puzzles are clever, and the scares are some of the greatest the franchise has ever produced. Maybe if the game hadn't debuted on the failing Dreamcast, it would have drawn more attention upon its release. But then again, it might have something to do with that awful name. Number 3. Super Punch-Out. Punch-Out for the NES was more than just a great game, it was a childhood institution. It's gone down in history as one of the most recognisable retro titles of all time. What kid doesn't have fond memories of failing to beat Mike Tyson and taking out their frustrations on the pathetic Glass Joe once again? Well, Super Punch-Out not only improved upon the first game in every conceivable way, it actually made an effort to advance the core gameplay and add a new layer of depth to the experience. Unfortunately for some gamers, its attempts to mature the franchise may have detracted too much from the simple nature of the first entry. Number 2. Condemned 2 Bloodshot. Although many players may have picked up Condemned Criminal Origins as the best option among the sparse Xbox 360 launch lineup, they soon found one of the greatest horror games ever made, in my opinion. Condemned 1's thrilling tale of a detective on the hunt for a psychopath serial killer lent the game an addictive atmosphere of pure dread. It was a tone that few other games have ever been able to equal, but Condemned 2 absolutely nails it as well. The sequel plays out like an episode of CSI in the world of Tales from the Crypt. There's an underlying element of realism throughout the narrative that just makes the surreal elements all the more disturbing. However, it got a little bit too much for some people when you were able to shout people apart. It was like Skyrim before its time. And number 1, Dino Crisis 2. Had Dino Crisis not been made by Capcom, it would have been mocked everywhere as the biggest Resident Evil knockoff in the wide world of Resident Evil knockoffs. It was really little more than the original Resi games with dinosaurs in place of zombies, but I think that's cool. Dino Crisis 2, on the other hand, was a completely different story. Instead of survival horror, this is pure arcade action. Gone are the days of running away from velociraptors because you're out of bullets, and here are the days of shooting down waves of Triceratops with a rocket launcher minigun, I guess. There are few games even now that take as much pleasure in providing the kind of over-top action that Dino Crisis 2 does, and certainly back then this was a very rare treat. In fact, I'd go as far as to say this was one of the most ambitious gaming sequels ever released, and deserves a lot more love than it typically receives. And that's our list. Now, what did we miss out? Don't forget to let us know in the comments below, and as always, remember to like, share and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter here and What Culture Gaming in all of these places. I'm Peter from WhatCulture.com, and I'll see you soon.